The world's attention froze on the morning of July 30th, when a message, sharp as steel and clear as ice, echoed across the globe. In a heavily guarded room deep inside the Kremlin, lined with reinforced concrete and humming quietly with encrypted communications equipment, the Russian foreign minister stood behind a bulletproof podium. His eyes were cold and unwavering, his voice firm but controlled. Behind him, the golden, double-headed eagle of Russia loomed on a crimson backdrop, and the national anthem had just finished echoing through the room. With no warning, he began. Speaking into the microphone, his words broadcasted across every major state channel, and across the frightened screens of ordinary people. No more concessions, he said slowly. The era of negotiations is over. Analysts and diplomats paused mid-sentence. Military experts shifted in their seats. Every global news channel dropped their usual programming. This wasn't rhetoric. It was doctrine. For months, the war in Eastern Europe had escalated piece by piece, like a chess game reaching its final moves. Ceasefires were declared, then violated. Diplomats flew back and forth like desperate pigeons in a crumbling empire, but nothing stuck. Russia had pushed forward steadily, but without the full commitment of its military machine. There was still room for negotiations, until now, in the weeks before this declaration, aerial drones crisscrossed Ukrainian skies day and night. Missiles struck rail lines, power grids, and logistics hubs. The world watched nervously, assuming this was just pressure, an attempt to gain leverage in talks. But behind the scenes, the Kremlin had grown increasingly infuriated. Every round of sanctions, every weapons shipment to Ukraine, every joint NATO exercise near its borders was seen as a personal insult to Moscow. The Kremlin believed it was being baited into defeat, and it refused. The final spark came late. One night, in the form of a digital breach, Russian cyber teams, allegedly working under the direct supervision of GRU, claimed to have intercepted and decrypted a highly classified NATO file. The document suggested that NATO was preparing to supply Ukraine with a next-generation fleet of long-range attack drones capable of hitting military targets well inside its Russian territory. Whether the document was authentic or a fabrication hardly mattered. It set off a chain reaction. President Putin immediately summoned a midnight emergency session. The War Council gathered in an underground bunker outside Moscow. Military chiefs, intelligence heads, economic strategists, and the inner circle of the political elite sat around a long steel table. The atmosphere was tense, and no one spoke out of turn. The meeting stretched for hours. Everyone in that room knew that a decision made that night would shape not just the war, but the entire future of Russia. When the meeting ended just before dawn, the foreign minister was handed a prepared speech. It wasn't a warning. It was a final line drawn in the earth. The Kremlin had decided no more diplomacy, no more deals. Only surrender would be accepted from this point forward. As the sun rose over Moscow, the declaration was already being translated and circulated. Across the world, the fallout began immediately in Washington. The U.S. president held an emergency briefing in the White House Situation Room. Generals, advisors, and cybersecurity experts gathered with worried faces. "We are now dealing with a post-diplomatic Russia," the president said, his tone somber. "We must assume they will act on their word." In Berlin, the German chancellor returned from vacation and faced furious questioning from parliament. Citizens protested outside the Bundestag. Some carried signs demanding peace, others demanded full military backing of Ukraine. Germany was caught between history and responsibility in Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his people from a secret location. His face was tired but defiant. "We will never capitulate," he said. "Ukraine will never surrender. Not today, not tomorrow, never." But even as leaders spoke, Russian military formations were already on the move. Fresh convoys of armor streamed across border checkpoints. Artillery units dug into new forward positions. Russian warships moved deeper into the Black Sea, cutting off potential supply routes. High-frequency radio signals indicated that Russia's electronic warfare units were fully engaged, jamming drones, communications, and GPS systems across swaths of Ukrainian territory. A new ultimatum followed within 72 hours. Russia demanded full surrender of all Ukrainian forces east of the Dnipro River. No exceptions. If the deadline passed, The statement promised irreversible and total consequences. Inside Russia, the state shifted into wartime mode. The Kremlin enacted what it called a strategic consolidation decree. Civilian industries were rapidly converted to military production. Food rationing began in some cities. Propaganda campaigns intensified. Television screens repeated phrases like, "Victory is survival," and "Capitulation is the only peace." Images of heroic Russian soldiers standing before burning. Western flags filled the media cycle in rural villages and urban factories. Life changed overnight. Workers were pulled into conscripted service. Trains ran on secret schedules transporting equipment. For many ordinary Russians, a silent dread settled in. They knew the road ahead would be dark, but few dared speak openly. But not everyone was silent. In shadowy corners of the Russian internet, anonymous voices began sharing coded messages. Exiled oligarchs in London and Dubai started leaking documents that hinted at cracks in the Kremlin's internal unity. Whispers emerged of certain generals who questioned the all-or-nothing strategy. China issued a neutral statement expressing deep concern, avoiding any clear support or condemnation. India called for urgent dialogue. "There will be no talks," the Russian press secretary said, "only surrender." NATO, faced with the first direct casualties of advisors in a missile strike near Lviv, North Sea, intelligence agencies entered full operational readiness. Even then, Russia remained unmoved. A high-ranking Russian official went on national television and sneered, "Let them come. We have no more compromises to make." By mid-August, the world held its breath. The skies above Europe hummed with surveillance aircraft. Military satellites orbited silently, tracking every movement. Civilians in border countries began stocking up on fuel, food, and supplies. Schools were told to prepare emergency evacuation plans. The sense of dread became a drumbeat, slow, constant, unstoppable dot. And yet, the Kremlin did not blink. Statement remained pinned at the top of every official outlet: no more concessions. A challenge no one could say how it would end. Whether Ukraine would endure, whether NATO would step in fully, or whether the world would descend into something far worse, a war no one could walk away from. But one thing was certain: the old world, the world of compromise and diplomacy, had died that day. A new chapter had begun, and it would be written in fire.